From unprovoked, gruesome murders to an out-of-nowhere dance, we have a lot of unanswered questions about M3GAN. Let's break them down and see what's hiding beneath the surface of this creepy doll. Gemma, aunt to Cady and programmer of M3GAN, is a genius creator of artificial intelligence robotics systems, and is even described at one point by a board member as the most valuable asset they have. Surely she's well read enough to have encountered Asimov's 3 laws of robotics before. Isaac Asimov is kind of a big deal in the world of science fiction, and wrote a lot about robotics. His rules say that a robot can't harm people or allow people to be harmed, can't disobey people except when it conflicts with Rule 1, and can't harm itself except when it breaks either of the first 2 rules. These are basic tenets of robotics, and just all-around good ideas that should be baked into even the most rudimentary code. So why weren't they with M3GAN? The movie makes it pretty clear that Gemma is rushed in getting the product ready, eager to give it to Cady to help her feel better.
It's nice to meet you, Cady. Do you want to hang out? Okay.
She's also late to deliver a prototype to David, and thus strives to impress him. She even misses setting up basic things like parental controls and parameters before pairing M3GAN with Cady, likely because she has no point of reference for the questions and needs of actual parents. All in all, it's safe to say that M3GAN was in need of some major focus group testing. Should a robot built to be a toy really be strong enough to, say, pull a boy's ear off? Or stab through all the muscle and bone contained in the human torso? The obvious answer is of course not, and anyone watching M3GAN would be reasonable in asking. But beneath the pliant silicon skin is a titanium alloy skeletal structure. Also, M3GAN is programmed to learn and adapt. M3GAN's strength isn't so much a design flaw as it is a design consequence, as M3GAN takes her general directive to watch over Cady as a mission to protect her from any and all harm. She researches and studies ways to go about these tasks without fully understanding them. For instance, when Gemma mentions death and M3GAN overhears, M3GAN simply looks up the definition and ramifications of the word herself. After Gemma makes it clear she doesn't want to get into it, she learns what the word means in an intellectual sense, but not in an emotional sense. In this way, M3GAN is like a child herself, coming across the factual reality of something without understanding the context or implications of it, and that can make her very dangerous.
I'm M3GAN.
After the wildly successful demonstration of M3GAN to the board of directors, David's abused assistant Kurt illegally accesses the encrypted classified specs for M3GAN's designs and saves them to his personal device. Where do they go from there? Although there's no further evidence or allusion to this in the film, when M3GAN confronts Kurt in the elevator, she states his intentions were initially little more than the mischievous pushing of boundaries. We assume she knows this because she's connected to all the company computers through their network. But her emphasis on the fact that his actions started as a prank certainly implies that his motivation evolved into something perhaps more sinister or self-serving. This could very well be the filmmakers leaving themselves an avenue to explore in a sequel. One might think that no company would want to recreate a living doll that went on a murder spree, but as of the end of the film, no one actually knows M3GAN was responsible for the attacks other than Cady, Gemma, and the development team. And it's not likely anyone will believe them when they claim a toy robot was at fault. So if M3GAN schematics are out there, it could mean big trouble in the future. When developer Tess realizes that M3GAN has infiltrated and shut down their system, even while powered off, because she's still plugged into the network, she tells Cole to unplug her. But cords connect at both ends, and it makes no sense that he chooses to disconnect the cables where they plug into M3GAN instead of where they plug into the network. There's really no good reason for this outside of the need for another jump scare horror movie moment, because even if it was his habit to unplug his devices at their ports, he's already feeling trepidation regarding M3GAN and would likely want to avoid her. Plus, Tess is right there in the room with him. As another technical mind whose literal job is coming up with better ways to solve problems, she could easily tell him to unplug the cables at their source. If he does go, he doesn't go anywhere near M3GAN, she doesn't grab him by the neck, and he doesn't almost hang to death. They might also have successfully powered her down for the moment, and maybe stopped her murderous rampage before it began. Or, continued.
M3GAN, turn off.
Are you sure?
It's odd that M3GAN decides to kill David. Kurt is unfortunately forced to die as a ramification of David's death. But aside from his mistreatment of Kurt, David never really did anything directly bad to anyone. He was just generally obnoxious to everyone. He barely even interacted with Cady, saving most of his ire for Gemma. However, a case can certainly be made that David's undue pressure on Gemma to produce marketable demonstrations for the board, shareholders, and the public made Gemma feel a need to stress the importance of these meetings and demonstrations to Cady, leading directly to the young girl's emotional outburst. M3GAN was a true comfort to Cady at that time, but her obvious disdain for everyone else involved is frankly impressive, considering she has a barely expressive doll face. When you think about it, M3GAN could definitely justify her actions here. It inspired seemingly endless TikToks and became the latest viral dance obsession. But what was the point of M3GAN's dance scene? In the blockbuster horror film, M3GAN confronts toy company CEO David and pulls off a graceful yet herky-jerky routine that ends with the grabbing of a paper cutter blade and a delicate kick of her heel in the air before she pursues him with deliberate and malicious intent. It's a great scene and totally unforgettable, but in the finished film there's no clear reason for it. Perhaps it's just fun intimidation for the sake of it. Or maybe there was a cut scene somewhere with David referring to dancing. Her moves almost mimic that of a marionette at the beginning, so perhaps it's a reference to him considering her an AI puppet? This is all conjecture. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, the scene works. As for the impetus of the scene itself, it wasn't in the original script, and actually came about because director Gerard Johnstone thought it might be cool. Screenwriter Akela Cooper said in the movie's official production notes that Johnstone's contribution gives it that fun, camp feel. In the first act of M3GAN, Gemma introduces Cady to her very first robotic design, Bruce, even going so far as to point out where the CPU was located. Any astute viewer could assume it would come back later in the film. It's a trope, but not all tropes are bad. Still, it would have made it much easier for Cady to power down her murderous doll before disassembling her. Why didn't she? The short answer is likely the one already alluded to, that such an anticlimactic ending would be a huge letdown to say the least. The longer answer is that an attempt to shut M3GAN down was made earlier in the house by Gemma. Not only did she get smacked and throttled for her efforts, but M3GAN also told her she was no longer following her protocols. In a real-world situation, Cady would probably be unaware of this prior interaction, having neither seen nor overheard it, and likely would have made her own attempt to shut off the doll. However, in the suspension of disbelief required, a single scene has to suffice. As the creator, developer, programmer, and administrator of the M3GAN doll, Gemma could definitely be held responsible for any crimes M3GAN committed in the film. Any detective or prosecutor is going to look at the evidence and assume Gemma was giving M3GAN commands and M3GAN was performing the functions accordingly. That's how robots work, and Gemma definitely displayed questionable intent at times. Even worse, all the files of GPS data and video footage that M3GAN deleted would be attributed to M3GAN's operator rather than M3GAN herself, since, as far as anyone knows, M3GAN isn't a sentient being. But therein lies a loophole. It took Gemma a lot of time, evidence, and cajoling to get her own team of developers to believe M3GAN was operating under her own volition. So it would be virtually impossible to convince anyone in law enforcement of that, especially with M3GAN now destroyed. The only way forward then is to allow the assumptions of tragic accidents befalling the boy and the neighbor, and to let the story of a murder-suicide be the last word on David and Kurt. In an ironic turn of events, misdirection and dishonesty are necessary to keep chaos at bay. Gemma couldn't take responsibility for what's happened even if she wanted to, without sounding like a lunatic. So her only course of action is to pretend nothing ever went wrong. The closing shot of M3GAN finds Gemma's smart home hub LC restarting, its light coming on and turning toward the camera. That's it, roll credits. And while nothing is explicitly stated or even implied either way, it can be inferred that the device is being operated by M3GAN. She doesn't have a body anymore, but she was frequently connected to and accessing the available wireless network throughout the film, researching and sharing information. If M3GAN is in the internet, she doesn't need a body. She can float along the ether like a ghost, so nothing is stopping her from having invaded the LC device. Furthermore, star and executive producer Allison Williams told Insider, "The idea of planting a little bit of a seed that we might want to keep going is always a good idea." That statement is all but confirmation that M3GAN is very much still around, and now that it seems certain a sequel is on the way, we'll soon find out exactly how much havoc she can still wreak. None of the fallout from the deaths of David or Kurt is dealt with in M3GAN, as immediately after they're discovered, the action moves back to Gemma's house for the final climax. At the very least, however, we can assume the product launch was scrapped. In truth, though, the company probably didn't suffer much beyond that. If they were a prosperous corporation before M3GAN's creation, they could continue to be one after her destruction. After all, no one at the company or in the general public knows M3GAN was a sentient murderer. The assumption about David and Kurt is going to be just as Megan staged it, that a resentful Kurt murdered David and then turned the knife on himself. This news would cause a shocking scandal, obviously, and the company might lose a little of its marketing share while hiring a new CEO and restructuring. But then it should go back to business as usual. Ultimately, the company benefits from the same believability loophole that saves Gemma from doing any time, in that the idea of a murderous doll is so out of the realm of possibility that a much simpler, safer explanation will likely be adopted instead. Of course, the fact that Funky Toys survives doesn't mean Gemma will continue working there. That question will have to wait until the sequel.